Hello, and welcome to Ward Talk, CTN's look at the political scene in Ann Arbor. I'm your host, Bonnie Gabowitz. We'll be discussing issues and solutions with the City Council members from our 5 wards on the third Wednesday of each month. Joining us is Jason Frenzel from Ward 1. Welcome, Jason.
Thanks, Bonnie.
And you were just saying that you've been an Ann Arbor resident for a very long time.
About 35 years now.
35 years, yeah. So you've certainly had a lot of time to, see what's been happening, what the issues are. And I understand that, you, in the short time that you've been on the council, you have dealt with a lot of very important issues, and certainly it's kept you very busy.
Indeed, indeed.
So let's just start with your ward, which is the first Ward 1.
Yep.
And any specific things that are going on. I understand there was a lot of housing development in your neighborhoods.
Yeah, the first ward is on the north side, and the town in general is seeing a lot of housing pressure. A lot of people want to move here. A lot of university students want to come in, and we're actually seeing a lot of people who are retiring from afar and wanting to move back. And so a lot of those folks have some significant amount of money that they can pay top dollar for our housing, which is driving housing costs up. And of course, the free market works sometimes very well, sometimes under under strain.
And just to mention that when these housing proposals come to you, the council really doesn't have their say in saying, well, you're going to build units that are too expensive. You don't have that option.
It is infrequent that we have a significant amount of influence. The way that zoning works is we say this is what we would like these areas of town to look like, and that's the rule over those parcels. And when a developer comes in, they react and interact with those rules. There are some situations where we have more influence like planned unit development. A PUD is a different kind of zoning where there's a negotiation between council and the developer. But those are very specific and unique situations.
So these particular housing developments in your ward were basically it's zoned for housing rather than business, is that correct?
Generally. There are 3 that I'd like to bring up specifically. One is the Toll Brothers, which is on Nixon Road on the north side. One that's under debate right now at Planning and City Council is the Lower Town Development, which is actually mostly housing and a little bit of mixed use, so a little bit of retail also. And then there's a couple developments out Pontiac Trail, one that's being developed right now that went through the process of approval 2 years ago, and another one that's working its way through the system currently. And the first and the last are all simply housing. The Toll Brothers location has been in the news a lot. It's created some consternation for a lot of the neighbors. There was a lot of environmental concern with the neighbors, some wetlands that are on site that were exacerbated by the Nixon Road corridor. The road was underserved for the people that were there, not to mention the hundreds and hundreds of people that will be there soon.
So have all those been worked out pretty much?
They're in process. So just as of the last 2 weeks ago, a roundabout was put in at the intersection of Nixon and Duvarn and Green. That intersection was really slow to get through because it was an offset. The roads were not aligned correctly. So getting through there was just exceptionally time consuming.
So that's definitely improved.
That one's distinctly improved. And then the corridor between that intersection and Kroger on Nixon a little bit further south, that whole row is going to get some improvements. They've coined it mini roundabouts. So we'll see how that goes, but there's some traffic problems of people being able to get out of their neighborhoods in that location.
And is there any housing development going on that's coming to completion soon, or is this all early building?
Right, so the Toll Brothers is drastically under construction at this point. A number of units are finished, it's still under construction. I don't know their time for completion, but I would imagine in the next quite a handful of months it will.
And do you have a number in your head roundabout of how many more units, housing units there will be? Are we talking hundreds or thousands?
I'm going with thousands at
Really?
this point. I heard this past winter from one of the developers that they had a known quantified need for 900 more beds for students. And that's not to say the other
Wow.
developments, right? And so well, the Nixon Road development, the Toll Brothers development is for residential, single family residential. The Lower Town location where Kroger's used to be sort of on Broadway below the U of M hospital, that one would be mixed rental and owner occupied, but that's a much more dense development, sort of high rise and apartments. So that would be mixed. And then one of the two locations out on Pontiac Trail is proposed as single family sort of townhouse style rentals for students, which is a very interesting scenario. It's something that our community doesn't know, but this developer has had work on in the past. So,
So
yes,
he has some experience with it.
they do. And of course, in all of those circumstances, the neighbors are concerned and want to negotiate the best situation possible for them, which is challenging.
So does the city expect that this will not really impact the educational system, the public schools?
Right. So one of the things that I like to think about for traffic-related issues, for parking, for schools, for libraries, is we don't want to build too much infrastructure before it's needed, because then we're outlaying a lot of capital prior to its need, and then it's underutilized for a number of years. You could think of it as a future gamble in some ways. And we don't want to wait too late until after the need has become, because then the residents that are here get frustrated because the resource or whatever, the infrastructure is overused. And so it's a constant process. So all those public services are a constant process of need and improvement constantly balancing each other. And I'll give anyone the right to complain that, sometimes it's a little bit too constrained, but also we wouldn't want to put $50 million forward that we don't really need to have right now, and perhaps we need it, we need that infrastructure built in 5 or 10 years. So
So some of this is wait and see.
Yeah, absolutely. And I get that it's frustrating, but it's also, that's how the system works. It's, the capitalistic system.
Okay, let's talk about the city in general, since we have a little catch up to do from the summer. And I know in just today's paper there was an article about this year's plans for the Deer Cull.
Yep.
And I understand, based on the article, that the city council's spending a little bit more money, and they're looking to increase the number of deer culled, but also in terms of sterilizing the females, is that also going to be increased?
The sterilization program is staying roughly the same. And then the culling, the lethal management component is increasing by a little bit over $100,000. I think it needs to be said, for fiscal responsibility's sake, that the city council before I was on had budgeted, and then we budgeted last year for a 4-year plan.
So the funds are there.
And so we're actually, what we did is allocate the 2019 funds into 2018, or late 2017, late 2017, early 2019. So this winter's cull is being increased and lowering next year's. The goal there is to, at some point, to create that ecological balance, so that the population isn't drastically increasing over time. And so the consultants that the city had hired strongly recommended that we try to bring that into balance faster, so that we're not spinning our wheels, if you will. And that's not to say who is for and against the cull. That's the plan of implementation.
And in terms of the reasons why, I think it's important to cover some of the things that not all residents might be aware of. But basically, there's a concern that specialists from University of Michigan are looking at the biodiversity and the fact that when you have too many deer, it's also impacting the balance of our plants and what's available to other animals. That's sounded to me like a crucial reason for doing the deer cull that might be misunderstood.
Yeah, yeah. And again, not to say that we should or should not perform a deer cull, but the over-herbivory, the overeating of plants in the understory of natural areas, as you know this, and some of the listeners may know that my background is environmental. I used to work for the park system, and so ecology is my background. And the loss of biodiversity in an ecosystem isn't just an aesthetic preference. It impacts the bees, it impacts the birds, it impacts all the rest of the ecosystem, which then ultimately impacts how the tree canopy is affected, the regeneration of the forest. And so there's an escalation and a constant wave of impact that happens if one portion of the system is out of balance. And that needs to be taken seriously, I believe.
Mm-hmm. And is this, if you look maybe 5 years down the line here, are they looking forward to having a smaller deer cull each year, so the large number of deer being killed will eventually be decreased and
Yep.
it won't be such a big issue?
Yeah, absolutely. I strongly believe that our city, our representatives can't tolerate both the social impact that's happening, you know, the not comfortable conversation that we're having that's really not been particularly healthy, but also the budgetary impacts long term are of significance, and I don't know that we have a lot of tolerance for that in the long term would be my guess. And so my understanding and my presumption is that the goal would be to drastically reduce the size of that program over time, and that's where the sterilization project comes in. We're an experiment for that, and the state was seemingly excited to have us look into that as a municipality. We're also an experiment for an urban program in general in the state. And so the idea of can we still have a population of deer that's not reproducing, that puts pressure on itself to not bring in more deer from outside of our parks. It really remains to be seen, but it's great that we have an institution in town that can help us with that research also.
Great. Well, we're going to be taking a break now, and when we come back, we'll continue with some more issues that are going on with the city.
Great.
Okay. We want to hear from you, so please email questions to ctn@a2gov.org or tweet us at #CTN in Arbor. We're taking a break, and we'll be back with more from Ward 1 and Jason Frenzel. Hi, this is Bonnie Gabowitz on Ward Talk. I'm speaking to Jason Frenzel, Ward 1, and we were just talking about your particular ward and what was going on with the deer calls, so we're going to move on now. One of the issues that has been very seriously looked at by the council and all the city are the traffic safety issues, and I know has been a lot that has been done to try to improve conditions so that there are no accidents. So let's just start with what changes have been made.
Yeah. So with our 2 years ago, we had the Vision Zero, no deaths via vehicular accidents, and there's a lot to be done in that work. I think it's important to note that we're just as a society, we're moving towards people being more car-centric and being faster in their cars, people paying less attention oftentimes because
being more distracted for
sure.
sure.
More distracted in so many ways. And we also have increased number of visitors and residents here in town. And so all those things are coming together at a pretty important pinch point for us. So earlier this year, we came up with a 3-year plan to implement safety, pedestrian and bike safety, which focused mostly around school zones, but throughout town in general. School zones are of particular concern for us. And that in some ways includes around the university. And then there's a number of key crossings all over town. And so you may have seen last year in 2016, a number of small experiments happen in the downtown area especially that were implemented much more drastically this autumn, just as school started this late September, early October.
And what were some of these changes that were made?
So the ones that you'll see in all over town are the little signs that are in the middle of the road that are bolted to the road. They're about this tall. And they say, yield to pedestrians, or stop for pedestrians when they're in the crosswalk. And you see these in communities all over the country, and I've seen them in Canada. Like they're sort of everywhere. And they act in 2 really important ways. They're a reminder that, hey, somebody's going to cross here, and it is your responsibility to stop as a motor vehicle driver. But also, it's actually a thing in the road. And so as a driver, when you see things in the road, when the road seems smaller, you stop and think a little bit more, which is important. We want people thinking while they're driving.
So you were looking at human behavior and how to change the behavior.
Right.
For drivers to be more alert.
Yeah. So we design our roads to be the safest as possible for vehicles, which means that they're a little bit wider, and which also means that our emergency vehicles can get through quite readily. But psychology says when it looks like a highway, you drive like a highway. And if it's still 40 mile an hour zone and it feels like a highway, unfortunately people start to creep that speed up, unfortunately. So putting reminders literally in the road has been a dramatic help for us. It's reduced the speed upwards of 10, 20 miles per hour in certain locations. At a lot of those same locations and other spots throughout the city, you'll also see a very strong concerted effort for the white striping that goes across a road. And that's a reminder that we're all used to and we all learned when we were in driver's ed. But we let them lapse for a long time and didn't put them down. And it's really a nominal fee for us to put those in. It's the staff time or the contractor time to get them in. But again, it's like this is where the pedestrians go. And it's just a physical and visual reminder for people that's a space for someone else, not in a car. And they go a long way. You probably have seen also that we've put a series of mid-block crossings, the RFBs, the blinking, the lights on top and the blinking lights at a number of key locations. We started doing that
now, is that started when somebody presses a button?
Yes, yeah. And all of these solutions are only partial solutions. They all have their strengths and they all have their challenges, but working with our motorists slowly and evolving how those work is really important, and getting them in a timely manner, which was our goal this year.
And do you see any improvement since all that has been put in place?
Yeah, I have heard from many of my constituents throughout the ward that their speeds in their locations around town where these have gone in have drastically reduced. And again, our goal was to get a majority of those in around school districts, just as school was starting or just prior to school starting this school year. And
yeah, and I do have a question for you, because we have so many visitors from out of town, either visiting families and friends, and also with the university and other colleges, having people coming in who are not familiar with Ann Arbor's streets or their rules. So the question is, how do you educate people who are only here temporarily and get them to learn what our particular rules are, especially the one about stopping when someone's at a crosswalk?
Yep.
Are there going to be any signs with that? Is that coming our way?
Yeah, and I think it should also be noted that we have a lot of visitors who come to the university hospital, both for work and to come for a day or a week. And those folks are in a different level of stress than the people who come into work, or the visitors, the parents who are visiting the university. So one of the things that I like to remind folks and think about is all of the traffic implementation, traffic calming and safety implementation procedures that we've put in, that we were just talking about, are national standards. You can't put something in a road that's not a national standard. So it goes within that construct that people who travel a little bit also see these items in other places. It's like the roundabout conversation. When we got that first couple roundabouts in on Fuller Road, and everybody was just freaking out, really. It
was a new thing that
yeah,
they
at
weren't
the same
used to.
time, I saw one go in Brighton, and I saw one go in Marquette, because it's a state standard. And so, yeah, seeing them go in for the first little while, the first year, the first couple of years, of course that's going to be a challenge to motorists to accept a new scenario. But over time, we see that improving. And in my neighborhood on Plymouth Parkway, Plymouth Road, you see those RRFBs, those blinking lights, working better and better over time. The first year that they went in, well, we put in a couple because of some tragic accidents that happened. And the first year that went in, we actually saw more accidents associated with them, because what was happening is somebody would want to walk across the street and someone would stop, and then another car would go to pass, and it wasn't normified that this person was stopping for a reason, because we've had a number of residents get hit that way, where a passing vehicle hit the pedestrian, unfortunately. And that possibility, of course, still resides, and we did have a student get hit that way just this summer, just in the last couple months. But we see those incidents drastically reducing as the motorists get used to it. To another portion of your question, though, we also have implemented a series of education and enforcement at the same time. Through a bunch of community listening sessions, especially related to the schools, we heard a lot of parents say, yeah, we want those little things that say, this is the speed you're going. We want those out. Yeah.
I've seen them.
And those work also for a few days. But the parents said, we also want cops. And we've put a bunch of cops out at the places around schools where we've had speeding problems. And it's not just a little bit of speeding problems. It's where we have a lot of speeding problems. It's on 7th Street, at Washington. It's on Pontiac Trail, near Barton. Those places where people are coming through and they feel somehow emboldened to drive 45 or 55 miles an hour in a 25 zone. That's completely inappropriate, and it is definitely within the police officer's right and the department's right to strongly enforce and give tickets for that.
So there's more enforcement going on?
Yeah, especially at this time at the beginning of the school season, to remind people that it's a school zone, and there are kids walking, and a lot of times there are kids actually walking across the street at that same time. And I hear the complaints about it, and I understand that some people feel like the enforcement is being too rigid. But this is how we get societal change to happen, and that's important.
And we have a few minutes left, and I know you in particular have been involved with the environmental issues, in that's your professional area of expertise. So let's just quickly mention some things going on with with your environmental issues in terms of what progress have we made?
Yeah, I think the couple really big ones for this year are the recycling facility, which we had to emergency close at the end of last year. We now have a new contractor that's in recycling. Arbor is now running that contract for our recycling here in town, while we are going through a process co-led with the county to potentially create a regional cooperation where we get more municipalities bringing their compost to one facility. We're still going through who needs what out of that situation so we can make good compromises and a strong plan. But that having a bigger infrastructure for that is going to give us a much stronger end result that's much more durable in time and ends up being a stronger recycling and environmental output because you can create markets, aftermarkets for those materials. So I'm really excited about that, but the next phase is a little bit slow. But we're recycling everything. There was a little bit there where we weren't recycling everything, and that was quite frustrating.
That's worked itself out.
Yeah.
Great. And in the minute we have left, I know people were concerned about the plume and what was being done with the cleanup. Is there any progress on that?
Cleanup's exactly the same. It's very minimal at this time, but the big improvements this year have been we've got a number of new organizations that are part of the court case. So the Huron River Watershed Council, where I work during the day, the city, and the county are all plaintiffs in the lawsuit now, which is a great situation for us. And the Sierra Club and the township have petitioned the EPA for a Superfund site, which gives us another potential avenue for resolution into the future. So they're not forward progress, but they're really important steps at this point.
Moving along.
Yep.
Moving along. And before we finish, I know the election is coming up for the city election as well as the county election.
Yep.
On Tuesday, November 7.
Yep. It's our civic duty to get out and vote.
Yeah, and so we just want to remind people to put that on the calendar.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, and I want to thank you for all the work you've done and telling us what the updates are. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
My pleasure also. Thank you.
Great. Remember to join us for a new episode every third Wednesday of the month. We'd like to hear from you, so please email us at ctn@a2gov.org. Attention, Ward Talk. You can also follow CTN and ask questions on Twitter at twitter.com/CTN in Arbor. We'll make sure to include your questions. For Ward Talk, I'm Bonnie Gabowitz. Until next month.